also ask that you mute your phones so you won't be hearing some background noise. We are recording this, and so it will be available to folks afterwards. And also, if you are presenting, please provide your presentation to either me or Terry Smith, and we'll make sure that's available as well. We're still collecting presentations from last week. We have the recording almost ready to go, but trying to make sure we have a package of materials for that. So thank you all who took part on February 10th, and now we'll continue with our information here February the 16th. So today's agenda includes the following. We're going to look at the statistics for the past year for the dairy industry. We'll have an update on organic, specifically Danone Horizon issues. We'll hear about the work of the Legislative Dairy Task Force. And then we'll have an update from our congressional delegation staff. So a lot to talk about today. So I am going to jump right in by sharing my screen with the dairy data from last year. So I know this may be a bit small to read, and I will put it with all the other presentations that will be available. But we ended the year with an average of 583 dairy farms in our state. The price on average for the Middlebury area was $17.23, so better than last year. That averaged $16.45, but a little more on par with 2019. That was $17.46, and then 2018, 15. So we've had some tough years. The best, of course, in the past was 2014 with 23.63. There are thoughts that this year, we heard on February 10th, may be coming in with prices more like 2014. The other one is the column labeled MILC payment. Of course, we went to the Dairy Margin Coverage Program in 2015. The average of the margin between all milk price and all feed price was $6.92 for 2021. So a payment was made on all the months of 2021. We also heard in our presentation last week that that may not be the case for 2022, but farmers should still take a hard look at that risk management because milk prices are good for as the paper they're written on. As soon as the paper goes away, the milk prices might change. So everybody should take a look and manage their risk. Milk production was a bit down this year at 2.564 billion pounds. That's information from USDA. Last year, about 2.6 billion even, and higher still in 2019 at 2.65 billion. So we lost a little bit of milk production, which you can also see we've lost a few in the cow numbers. On average last year, 167,000 cows. This year, 667,000 cows. That's all USDA data. The average number of cows per farm is a simple calculation of USDA's data on cow numbers and then our total number of farms. So the number of cows per farm, milking dairy cows, continues to go up. We're at 205 for the on average for the 2021. Certified organic farms, this information comes through NOFA. We've seen a drop there, down to 162 certified organic farms, high point back in 2012 of 205. So we are seeing some changes in the organic industry as well. Off-farm dairy processors, those that buy in milk, either tractor trailer load or smaller truckloads of milk, 88 of those. On-farm dairy processors, those that milk the animals and make the product, 70 of those for 158. We've seen a bit of a fluctuation, but at a good spot in 2021 with 158 processors total. So very positive. Page 2 of this document, and I will provide this document. Here's the cows per milking cow dairies per county across the state. So we have certainly seen some of our perennial dairy counties drop below 100 farms. Addison and Orleans both dropped below 100 farms this year. Franklin continues with that. Just over 100 farms there. No, we have dairy farms still in every county, so important to know. I will provide this information so people can get a closer look. Also of interest, the data below of cows dairy cow farms by size. This is based on milking cows only and based on the water quality divisions in statute of large farm operation over 700 milking cows, medium farm operation 200 to 699 milking cows, and a small farm under 200 milking cows. In 2017, the legislature put in the requirement for certified small farms that was between um, 50 50 to 200 milking cows. So you see that change coming from 2017 on. The total in the category of small farms is the a second number from 2017 on. The number of certified small farms is the first number. So it's not 250 in addition to 647, it's 250 are certified out of the 647 farms. So you can see that the number of large farms grew to 35 and has stayed there for 2 years. The medium farm operations continue to decline under 100 at this point, and the certified small farms are bouncing around a little bit. We are still working to get all that should be certified small farms signed up. That isn't complete yet. And so the average total number of farms for the year continues to decline, a high in 2012 of 972 to 853 at this time. So there's a lot of data there. Not planning on a great discussion of it because there's so much data. But if there are any specific questions for this data at this point, be glad to take a question, but then we'll move on to the next presenter. Any questions from the group? All right, our next presentation is on organic, and we've had a task force in Vermont to work on the issues in August. Danone Horizon contacted the 28 dairy farmers in Vermont and informed them that their contracts would not be renewed. They gave them until August 2022 that they'd maintain the contract for that length of time, and then the contract would end. There has hence been further information that they would extend that contract to the end of February 2023. But the task force met starting in September and really put some work into trying to find solutions for the farms. Some of the things the task force has done, collected all the data on these farms, how much milk, where are they? That would be potentially important to another buyer of where those farms are and how much milk there is. A farmer resource list document with immediate resources ready for dairy farmers. What are the contacts for the different milk buyers, the dairy cooperatives, farm agricultural mediation, farm first, farm viability, what services are there out there that could help these dairy farms? And we got that out right away in September of 2021. A survey was completed of all dairy processors in Vermont of, is there any potential for them to take on more milk? Would they take on milk in general? Would they take on organic milk? What were some of the things that might impede them from doing so? And what kind of either training or like market development or packaging, or what other resources might they need? We had 44 dairy processors respond. The agency followed up with a subset that was looking for more milk. Those processors really wanted the milk maybe 2 days a week and could not take on all of a farm's milk volume. So they were put in contact with the buyers of organic milk in the region that might be able to manage that kind of demand, as in one or couple of days a week, and what happens to the milk the rest of the week. So you need a stable, somebody providing that balance of that milk. So we looked into that as well. Secretary Vilsack requested the formation of a regional working group, the Horizon Impact New York, Vermont, and Maine farms. So Secretary Vilsack reached out and asked for a regional working group, and Laura Ginsburg has led that group, and I'll let her, she'll present next, and we'll talk more in detail about that. One of the things that has been positive that has been tracked by the task force is the origin of livestock rule for organic certification. That's really important of an organic herd transitioning once to become organic versus having heifers as they calve transition to organic continuously. It's a very um, a minutia of rules, but it's very important to the organic industry. And so that has started to move forward. Our congressional delegation provided that insight that it has moved forward into the Office of Management and Budget for review, which is another step in the process for federal rulemaking. So very important. Vermont Farm Bureau met with their counterparts in Maine and New York to look into this issue. And on January 10th, the Northeast Farmer Pledge Partnership Program was launched. Gary Hirschberg is behind this program. It is a program to drive demand for organic dairy, which would increase the need for organic milk from farmers. So it is not more than that. It is a program where those who produce organic dairy products could state where their milk came from. Does it come from Vermont or Maine? And that a consumer should pledge to purchase more organic dairy products and look for this seal that would be either at the grocery store or on a product that states that these products do come from the Northeast and that they support and buy organic milk from farmers in the region. So lots of work has been worked on and completed. Yesterday, a list of options were sent to dairy farmers that were impacted by the Horizon decision for them to start vetting those options if they'll work for them. We know there's still some time. There's still more work to be done. We're hearing back that there are some very specific things that farmers should be thinking about if they are looking and hoping to get a new market. And that would be that all the bulk tanks have to be large enough for every other day pickup, no more daily pickup. There's some driveways that need work, that only tractor trailers are coming. 10-wheel trucks are going to be a thing of the past. There's a lot of pressure on hauling companies, and 10-wheel trucks probably are going to become a thing of the past. So increasing those size of the driveway to accommodate a tractor trailer. That chart recorders are needed now. A chart recorder can be retrofitted to an older vault tank, but it does just that. It checks the temperature. There's a pen on it, and it records the temperature all the time. Those are going to be needed there as well. And last but not least, making sure that you're hitting all the animal well-being concerns, potential overcrowding of a facility, and also stanchions that are headlocks, that there's either two bars or wood that holds the cow's head. Those need to be replaced. They're no longer going to be accepted. So some work for farmers to do to make sure they're attractive to new buyers if that's what they wish to do. So some work to be done. The agency is working with lenders as well as foundations to see if there's any way to assist farms to implement those changes if they need to on their farms. So that's a lot of information, but Laura Ginsburg is on as well, and she can talk about the regional work that was done and the recommendations that were made to USDA. As of this point, we haven't heard back yet from USDA, but hope to in the near future. Laura?
Thanks, Diane. Hi, everyone. So since Diane provided a background of the Horizon situation and what led to the formation of this Northeast Task Force, I will skip those details, but happy to provide more information if folks have questions. So Secretary Vilsack of the USDA did ask us to convene a group to provide them with recommendations. This was in mid-October, and his request was that we get recommendations to them by in 60 days or by mid-December, and our recommendations were submitted on December 16th. They are available on the agency webpage, but we can also send them out to this group as a document. So the process was that the task force was led by myself, representing both the state of Vermont and the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, which is a USDA funded innovation center, one of 4 in the nation. We represent the 10 states of the Northeast. And I served in that role alongside Britt Lundgren, who's the Director of Organic and Sustainable Agriculture at Stonyfield Organic. We had 27 organizations at the table representing state agencies, extension, processors, producer associations, national policy and advocacy organizations, and various subject matter experts, such as folks engaged in trucking, pasture and forage and production specialists, so that we could get a whole comprehensive view of what's going on farm and in the distribution, processing, and marketing spheres for dairy. The task force was not seeking consensus decision making, and all participants were able to submit recommendations for consideration. So that is an important piece to call out, in that we worked as groups, but again, we're not seeking that consensus language. So there are some recommendations that are similar to each other, but take slightly different approaches. In order to distribute the work and dive in as deeply as we could over 2 months, we broke into subgroups to focus on specific areas. These subgroups included distribution logistics, institutional markets, processing expansion, farm viability, and federal policy. And the task force met as a whole every other week with subgroup meetings between, and sometimes subgroups were meeting multiple times between, inviting in additional subject matter experts to hear about on the ground situations, the reality of particular areas. I led the distribution group as an example, and we had a conversation with CDL training schools and truck driving companies and companies that haul milk to understand their particular and unique circumstances. So all of the groups did hear from subject matter experts, which provided rich conversation and additional information in such a short amount of time. Then the groups and the task force as a whole developed recommendations. So some came out of subgroups. Some recommendations came from individuals or organizations. And USDA requested that the recommendations specify the ask, an existing mechanism to implement or fund the idea, if we could identify one that existed at the federal level already, and a funding request if applicable. So when you read through the recommendations, that's how they're structured, is to frame out each one as an independent idea that could be funded or supported outside of the entire document. And at the end of the recommendation development, all participating organizations were able to essentially sign on and show their support for different ideas. We have 13 organizations take part in that and identify which ideas they support. So when you read through, you can see that some ideas did receive more sign on, essentially, even though there wasn't consensus decision making, than other ideas. The Agency of Agriculture did put in 6 recommendations. And again, these are meant to support more than Vermont. They're meant to support the region. So the funding levels for some of them are flexible and vary in the amount, but they're meant to support farmers outside of the state boundary, which is how the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center functions. So we did ask for grant funds to support existing processors. So this would be processors that are looking at scaling up or putting in new lines to quickly absorb additional milk production capacity. We asked for $50 million for those grants. Grants to support new processors. This is primarily farms who want to become processors of their own milk, but could include a new processor that's not a farm. We're asking for $5 million there. Grants to support technical assistance for whole farm system review and improvements. This would include some of the things that Diane mentioned, like bulk tank upgrades, driveway repairs, energy efficiency, looking at how cows are housed to make sure that they're meeting guidelines and standards. This one's a tough one to fund because driveway enhancement and repair is not covered under very many USDA programs. So we didn't have a funding mechanism for this, but there's some potentials there that are in development. And we asked for $25 million there, knowing that the expense and the overhaul of systems can be expensive on some of these older farms. Diane, along with state agencies from the other impacted states, developed a gap funding program for impacted farmers to be paid at organic prices if they have to ship to a conventional market. That has flexible funding amounts based on the amount of coverage, essentially, that the farm would be receiving to cover that difference in pay price. And then we asked for technical assistance funding to support long-term assistance as farmers switch processors, knowing that other processors all have very different production, housing, management, record keeping requirements between each other, and that those farms who ship to Horizon would likely have to meet new requirements moving forward to meet new processor guidelines. And then additional technical assistance to farmers who may be exiting the dairy industry so that they're provided with specific services that are tailored to a dairy exit strategy, which would include things like herd sell-off, new enterprises on farm, what to do with young stock and equipment and farm family decision making. So those two technical assistance pots totaled about $1.5 million. Again, as Diane said, we've not heard back from USDA. There has been a few conversations where they've been asking clarifying questions, and we are eagerly awaiting to hear what level of support that they may be providing. And that's it. That's a rapid fire of how the task force worked, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Laura. So yes, that was a lot of information pretty quickly. Questions from anyone? All right, I'm not hearing any. So our next speaker, Jackie Folsom and Dan Smith on the Legislative Dairy Task Force. And Dan, you tell me when you want your slides to go up, and I will do so.
I guess you can put it up. Jackie and I have been exchanging emails. We're a little bit on the fly, so I put this together on both our behalves.
There, can you all see slides?
It's blank right now, Diane.
Give it a minute. Anything yet?
Not yet.
Well, it says it should be. All right, why don't you guys start talking and I'll work on my technical difficulties.
Okay. So the task force to revitalize the Vermont dairy industry was created by the Vermont legislature 2 years ago this spring as part of a two-part plan. The legislature directed the Department of Financial Regulation to conduct an analysis of the current status of the dairy industry and changes that had occurred and its current configuration on the one hand, and also to look at specifically the issue of the impact of federal milk pricing on the viability of dairy farms and to make some assessments about farm viability going forward, and also to look at the potential for the state to regulate milk prices on top of federal milk prices. And then the second thing the legislature did was create the task force to follow up on the report that DFR had prepared once received. We're still in a black hole, Diane, so keep talking. The task force, the DFR report was completed at the end of 2020 and presented to the legislature in January of last year. The task force was supposed to get started 45 days after that, but didn't get started until the following, and our report was due the end of the year. So we spent the better part of the spring and the summer and early fall taking testimony on the dairy industry as in response to the DFR report. And then there we are. So go to the next slide, if that'll work.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm just basically working through the timeline. So we worked all summer and fall, as I mentioned, and in the interim, not only had COVID erupted early in the process, but also in the middle of our work, Congress passed 2 bills that directed a lot of federal financing our way. So the emphasis of the task force started to shift to consider how all of those funds could be brought into the state in response to all the testimony that we had heard. So instead of just focusing on price regulation, we kind of inevitably had to consider the impact of the financing that has been described over and over as a once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity. So instead of just looking at the milk price as a solution or means to address the problems we were hearing about, we started to think about how that funding could be used in addition. And the net result of that was the task force presented a series of recommendations that were both short and long-term. Short in the sense of trying to take advantage of the funding opportunity, and longer term, primarily back to the pricing issue, and in addition, the question of additional capacity. Next slide. So the DFR report, on the one hand, concluded that the federal order program needed change. They didn't, as the box says, they stayed away from making an assessment of what was going to happen to the federal order program, but did say that change was needed there. In addition to that, on the state level, they made recommendations not necessarily for action, but different subject areas that should be pursued by the task force in response to their report. And as you can see, they covered quite a bit of ground, from risk management and hedging. What could the state do with regard to that? They did look at the question of a state milk marketing order. They revisited the issue of a compact, spent quite a bit of time diving into supply management, looked at the organic issue, and then looked at some on-farm, more micro suggestions of what could be done. With that report in mind, next slide, the task force came up with a series of recommendations, and Jackie, maybe it seems it'd be best if you want to go through and address what the task force did. I'll deal with the pricing orders if you'd like, and you can run through the others. Does that make sense?
Sure, that's fine. Thanks, Dan. So we had a lot of discussion on a variety of subjects. We had a lot of farmers, lenders, truckers, cooperatives come in and testify. And for me, it was exciting to also have Representative Marcotte, who chairs the House Economic Development Committee, and Representative O'Brien, who was our connection to the House Ag Committee, as well as Senator Brock from Franklin County, because they all got an immersion into dairy pricing and dairy issues, and it was pretty interesting. So the first one that we looked at and we recommended, and actually we're trying to get it through the State House right now, is that the state payment of farmer premiums for participation in the DMC program for Tier 1 milk up to $9.50. Senator Starr and that committee got through into the Budget Adjustment Act with help from Senator Kitchell, $2.6 million to cover premiums for this year for 100% sign up for all the dairy farms in the state at the $9.50 level. That's with a cap of $5 million, 5 million pound production. I would just like to reiterate what Diane said, because we heard last week from Agrimark's economists that people are not signing up for this because the milk price seems to be great. I'd like to remind everybody that it seemed to be great when COVID hit too, and we went from $20 milk to $15 real quick, and it was a disaster for the dairy industry. Prices for feed seem to be going up pretty well, and even though the milk price may be up there right now, we would strongly encourage all dairy farmers in the state of Vermont to please sign up for that DMC coverage. It's been extended to March 25th. We will be, as soon as the governor signs off on that Budget Adjustment Act, The Agency of Ag is prepared to have a very simple reimbursement program for that premium, so says Diane. And it won't require as much documentation as the last assistance program did through the agency. Hoping it's going to be as simple as a copy of your premium bill and a W-9 for payment. So please encourage your farmers to sign up for this. It's important. It's a payment of $7,500. You just don't know what's going to happen to the milk price. We also looked at encouraging farmers to increase long-term participation in other USDA risk management programs, and we did look into trying to pay premiums for the DRP and the LGM, but it got a little convoluted in the short amount of time we had for discussion. I don't think that's off the table yet, but we'll have to have some more deep dives into how we would do that. We are hoping that the state will advocate for the reauthorization of these 3 programs through the federal farm bill coming up. We are advocating for federal milk market orders reform in the program, and hopefully we'll hear something from our federal delegation about that. We want a legal opinion regarding the raw milk use tax, the producer tier payment program, and follow up on task force review and action. We're looking at expansion of assistance of infrastructure programs and funding of grant writers. Diane or Laura, I think, mentioned that there was a request to USDA for assistance for things like bulk tanks and driveways. When we initially when Senator Starr put in the request for the funding for the DMC program, there was also an allocation in there. It was only $500,000, but it was a start to assist with those types of things. Right now, I don't know where that is. I know that we had to change the language a little bit to put the DMC coverage into the Budget Adjustment Act, and I'm hoping that we can still find money for that, the other piece, the infrastructure. We did look at alternatives for moving the cost of hauling from dairy farmers to other sources. I don't think we're done with that, but it is, again, another complex issue, and how we would do that would be a challenge. And they are reviewing conforming weight limits on Vermont highways to facilitate regional dairy hauling. I believe there was something in the T-bill that had a piece in there relevant to dairy haulers. It was really great to have Representative Marcotte on the task force, because he really got a sense of the challenges of the labor situation on the farms. And I haven't been able to monitor that myself, but I know that there has been ongoing discussion. There's also been discussion about expanding the continuing the career tech education programs, so that we might be able to get some apprenticeship programs or some assistance that way. And we're always trying to figure out how we can get more Vermont milk into state and school, into the state institutions and the schools, so that they can purchase that and continue the connection with our farmers and our consumers, our young consumers. So I think I'll hand it back to Dan on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. I kind of blew right through who the task force members were, and I apologize. And I echo Jackie's comments. Having members from the legislature on non-ag committees was really helpful in the discussion. Representative Marcotte had me come in and make a presentation, and absolutely he was focused on the labor issue and brought a different perspective, a broader perspective that led to the discussion that included the issues of housing in particular. I would say that the testimony that we heard indicated that labor issues and transportation issues, right along the lines of what Diane was talking about for organic, is really those two issues have emerged as real concerns to be addressed. And having Representative Marcotte on for both is real helpful. Senator Brock brought a pretty searching financial scrutiny to the process, and where he came out in the end is that if the task force was going to take some time to try to, in effect, marry these proposals to the availability of federal funding, which is now underway in the legislature. Then once that process plays out some, then the task force really needs to get back together and have some assessment, a risk cost benefit assessment of how the money is being spent, how the money might be spent to make sure that it's cost effective.
And one more thing, Dan, before you go on, I'd just like to say, currently as we're meeting, there's another group that's meeting having to do with the money that was put into the VHCB for farm labor housing rehab. And so the Champlain Valley Trust, Champlain Housing Trust and UVM have combined forces, and they're going to be handling the administration of the first pilot project of $500,000. Supposed to have the applications up by March, and hopefully farmers will be able to find out if they can rehab some of their farm labor housing or even build new if they need to. These are going to be grants. They're going to be loans, but they turn out to be grants after 10 years. There will be zero interest, zero payment, and at the end of 10 years, if you have met all of the requirements, the money will be forgiven. So please, anybody that is looking at doing anything such as electrical, heat, clean up bathrooms, pay attention to when the applications come out. I'm sure it'll come out, information will come out through the Agency of Ag and Farm Bureau and a variety of other organizations. This is a great opportunity for farmers to update their farm labor housing and really make a difference for your employees. So thanks.
So I think that the final sort of long-term issues that the task force looked at, number one, increased processing capacity, slightly different take on that. The testimony from the market administrator's office indicated that of the roughly 2.5 billion pounds of milk that's pooled under the federal order, raw milk produced in Vermont, almost 2 billion pounds of it is utilized in state. So there isn't a whole lot of milk that's moving out of state for which additional processing capacity is really necessary. Of that 500 million pounds, a good chunk of it's going to fluid milk plants, and another piece of it's going to the powder plant for balancing. So when you dig into the numbers, there's not necessarily a whole lot of excess capacity in the state. So the task force recommended looking at the possibility of expanding existing capacity, Cabot, Ben & Jerry's, whether they have needs for example, for existing capacity, build out for more farmstead operations to take their efforts to the next level, but not really a look for a great big single processing plant to change the dynamic of the industry in the state. And finally, the task force circled back around to the issue of what the state might be able to do with the regulatory side in state. And in revisiting the big changes that have been brought to the industry from really a transforming change from an industry that was based on producing and transporting raw milk to the fluid milk markets in Boston to being utilized in state for high-end value-added products. That change requires some legal analysis first as to what the new configuration lends to the state. And the task force recommended to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly agreed to retain a law professor to provide an assessment, a legal assessment, and that assessment is ongoing, and we hope to have the results of the assessment before too long, at which point that we've further recommended that the task force be allowed to extend its life beyond March so that it can get back and review the legal opinion against the changes to the industry that have occurred, number one, and second, to do the cost-benefit analysis that Senator Brock recommended that we do. So that request is before the legislature right now. We're scheduled to cease operation in March, but I expect we'll be able to extend our operations going forward. So I hope we're stayed within time, Diane, and that's our presentation.
Super. Thank you, Dan and Jackie. Questions for either Dan or Jackie on the Vermont Legislative Dairy Task Force? All right. You guys are a quiet group today. All right. So we would like to now invite the staff of the federal congressional delegation to probably turn on your cameras if you have them. I see Tom Barry, thank you, and Will Stevens, great, and should be one more, maybe. And there we go, Alex Piper. There we go. We have all three. We have Senator Leahy's staff, Senator Sanders' staff, and Congressman Welch's staff. So we'll let that go in the order of seniority. So Tom Barry, and I think Andrew's on as well from Washington. Is that true?
Yeah, I believe Andrew's tuned in as well. I don't know if he's got his camera activated, but if you'd like to turn on your camera.
I'm on, but mostly lurking.
All right.
Lurking.
All right, Tom, you're on then. Andrew can lurk and Tom will speak. It's all good. Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew's the only reason that I seem halfway intelligent ever. So by way of introductions, Tom Barry do the ag portfolio for Senator Leahy in Vermont. A lot of you know me. I mentioned introductions because I'll first mention as far as some new faces or familiar faces and new roles in Vermont. John Roberts is starting, I think, this week as the new Farm Service Agency Executive Director. I'm sure a lot of folks on the call know John. Worked on the Shelburne Farms Brown Swiss herd way back in his youth and has since had his own dairy farm, worked for Vermont Ag and Markets, worked with the Addison County Farmers Group, and is now on Senator Leahy's recommendation, the Executive Director of the Farm Service Agency in Vermont. So welcome, John. I'll mention Sarah Waring is now the state Vermont and New Hampshire USDA Rural Development Director, again on Senator Leahy's recommendation. And we have a state conservationist, that's administrative hire, Travis Thomason, heading up NRCS in Vermont. So after a bit of a leadership vacuum on our federal ag agencies, we're fully, we've got up to full strength on leadership there now. Senator Leahy chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee, and we have now a continuing resolution funding at fiscal year 22 levels through March 11th. The Senate has yet to pass that. We hope to do that this week, meaning we can adopt the federal spending bills, one would hope, by the middle of March. And among the highest agricultural priorities that Senator Leahy tracks in annual spending bills is the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, housed at our own Vermont Agency of Agriculture, funded most recently, and we expect in FY22 at the Senator's request at $6 million a year. So if you're not availing yourself of the opportunities through Northeast Dairy Innovation Center, please check out what they have to offer. Give a quick update on the dairy margin coverage program. Some of that's already been done, but it's a program that Senator Leahy supported in the 2018 Farm Bill. As Jackie said, sign up is open now and will remain open through the 25th of March. Right now, Vermont sign up is a bit slow, and especially with the state now, it seems stepping in to cover the premiums. What was a good deal becomes just a fairly straightforward no-brainer in a lot of ways, I think, if you look at it. And keep in mind that that program did pay out more than $25 million to Vermont farmers in 2021. And it has recently been enhanced with a couple of changes that Secretary Vilsack announced in Vermont when he was here with Senator Leahy in August of last year. The feed cost calculator now has been enhanced to look at higher value alfalfa, and there's an opportunity to adjust one's base in the program. And so it is more generous than it has been in the past. Hopefully, again, the milk price stays up, and when we don't, the best news is when this program does not pay, but it's a better program than it was, and especially with the state stepping in with some help with the premium. So definitely take a look at that program. And looking forward to the FY23 Farm Bill. And I will remark the first Farm Bill since 1975 that will be written without Senator Leahy in the room. We are hopeful and right now don't see any strong reason why the dairy margin protection program, coverage program would not be included in the next Farm Bill, but stay tuned on that. So it's tough predicting the future. There's been a few mentions of market reform, and I'll note that Senator Leahy joined Senators Gillibrand and Collins on a bipartisan bill that was introduced, hasn't moved yet, but introduced, calling for milk market order hearings, especially addressing Class 1 pricing. And it builds on Senate Agriculture Committee hearing in September on modernizing milk pricing. So the senator is joining some of his colleagues to push for hearings that would look at market reform. And so stay tuned on that. We recently had a administrative win, and it was a heavier lift than probably it should have been, going right up to the highest levels of leadership at USDA. But for folks who may have wanted to participate in the CREP program and found it to not be particularly useful for the past few years, there have been some repairs made to how that program is delivered in Vermont. And so we should be back up and running with that program. On the conservation front, I would say stay tuned for a number of opportunities coming down the pike that will address the climate impacts of conservation practices in a way that supports conservation practices. There are a number of things proposed in the Build Back Better bill, which we haven't passed yet, and Will from Sanders' office may have more to say on that. But there are other announcements coming forward from the administration on conservation programs to help farmers address climate. So stay tuned. I'll also say that we should have some additional funding available for water quality related practices, especially in the Champlain Basin, above and beyond what's already offered by the state of Vermont and NRCS through significant funding in the infrastructure bill that for the EPA's work on Lake Champlain. Some of those dollars will go to on-farm practices. So Vermont Agency of Agriculture should be heavily involved in that going forward. And I'll note that transportation has come up several times, and I'll note that there are provisions in the infrastructure bill that call on the federal motor safety regulators to establish an apprenticeship program to bring 18, 19, and 20-year-olds who are qualified into the fold on operating larger motor vehicles. So a little bit of progress there, hopefully. And with that, and I hope I've left a little bit for people to talk about, I'm going to hand it over to Senator Sanders' newly minted agricultural lead, Will Stevens.
Thanks, Tom. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, very much. Hi, everyone. Will Stevens. I am Senator Sanders' outreach representative for agriculture and small business. Happy to be here. And I'm going to deviate a little bit from the script. As Tom mentioned, there is the Build Back Better bill, which is kind of in pause right now. Senator Sanders has a couple of initiatives in that bill, including debt relief and climate smart agriculture provisions that he supports. But I want to take this opportunity to just acknowledge the hard work of the two task forces that we just heard from. It's been impressive, the integrative approach you've taken, the solutions you've come up with, and our team over on the Sanders side is going to be looking for ways to help out and provide support as appropriate. And I'm excited to do that and to be a part of that. As part of my outreach position for Senator Sanders, I've been doing a lot of meet and greets with folks, and some of the things that we've been hearing about relate to what I'll call back of the house supports for our dairy industry including trucking, labor, workforce development things, some of which have already come up. So we're going to be tuned into that as well, seeing again where we can provide support. For that, we are starting to think about the Farm Bill. We're going to be in the next month or two start convening or identifying potential stakeholders to start the process of discussing kind of what we'd like to see in there, who we'd like to get represented. And again, one of the challenges Jackie mentioned, she alluded to the farm worker housing meeting that was taking place at the same time. Sometimes we find ourselves in the position of having 2 or more meetings to attend at one time. Happy to be here. Sorry I missed the worker meeting, but I'll catch up on that with Dan later. And I think Alex has plenty to add. So again, I'll pass the mic over to him.
Thanks, Will and Alex.
Thanks all. Alex Piper here with Congressman Welch. Yeah, I'll add just a few things. I don't want to retread the Danone Horizon events, but do have an update there. From as Diane mentioned earlier, in December, the task force sent in their recommendations to USDA. We've been in touch with USDA trying to get some information on when and how they'll respond to that, to those recommendations and ways they can engage. Yesterday, our 3 bosses, along with 7 other members from the Northeast, sent a letter to Secretary Vilsack urging them to quickly respond and engage on solutions to the organic dairy crisis in the Northeast. So we're hopeful that there's something there's plenty that can be done from their end, and that we'll hear from them in the near future. So just continue to push there, and echoing Will's gratitude and appreciation for all the work of the task forces so far. And then the final point, with the Farm Bill discussion starting to get going over here in the House, there's been a couple hearings in the Ag Committee. I think this year we'll see hearings and marker bills being introduced with discussion topics starting. Conservation and climate, I think, will be a huge focus and big priority from our side, both in the office and from this side of the Hill. And Peter will certainly be advocating and actively shaping that bill this year from the House side, including the reauthorization of the DMC and anything else we can do to be helpful for you all.
All right, that was a lot of information. Questions from the assembled group? All right, you are a quiet bunch today. All right, thank you, everybody. So we're recording this, and we will collect all presentations. We'll make it available as soon as we can get all the technical stuff done. Thank goodness there are people that know how to do that more than me, but we will get this ready and out to everybody. So I thank you all for your participation. So to let you know, those who need to know, we had 55 people last week and 43 people taking part this week. So thanks everybody for all your information. Great job and really informative. So thank you all for your participation, and we'll call it a meeting well done.
Thank you,
All
Diane.
right. Thanks everybody. Take care.
Yep. Thanks, Diane.
Bye now.